السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. خير الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثات بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. All praise is due to Allah. We praise Him and seek His help. We seek His forgiveness for the evil urgings of our souls and our wrongdoings. He whom Allah guides, none can misguide. And he whom Allah refuses guidance, none can guide him. I bear witness that there is none worthy of worship except Allah, alone without any partners. And I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is his messenger and his servant. O you who believe, revere Allah with the right reverence and do not die except as Muslims. Verily the best speech is the speech of Allah, the Quran, and the best guidance is the guidance of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The worst of matters in religion are those which are invented by people. For every innovation is a bid'ah, a prohibited innovation, and every bid'ah is an act of misguidance that leads us to hellfire. Dear brothers and sisters in Islam, one of the 40 hadith compiled by Imam Nahwi translates as, let those who believe in Allah and the last day honor their guests and be good to their neighbours. And the Prophet has said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that he is not a believer. He is not a believer. He is not a believer who eats his fill and lets his neighbour go hungry. So we have a duty to neighbours, it's very clear. And the Prophet ﷺ further said that Jibreel came back time and time again telling me about the rights of the neighbour, until I thought he would include him in the list of those who inherit. In those days, of course, almost everywhere in the world, there was space, and the space was between houses. It was rare that houses were joined together unless they particularly desired that kind of design. But the neighbours used to look after each other, and this was actually in all cultures, not only in Islam, although Islam made it a duty of the believer. Islam, the laws of the deen of Allah, awakened us to the fact that we must be good to our neighbours, even if our neighbours are not good to us. But formerly it was something that permeated every society. The last time time that I was in the Philippines in 1997, I saw this in the countryside, that my sister-in-law was cooking and she would add water and deliver a portion to the neighbours on this side and the neighbours on that side. And sometimes the neighbours would come while it was cooking and say, you know, today we have some guests also, so be a little generous. Like this. And there was a culture of helping each other. And this is in many, many civilizations. Today, this has more or less disappeared in the richer nations. And I'm including the Emirates and the richer nations, unfortunately. We have neighbours now because the structure of our housing systems is different. We have these flats that never were there before. There's apartment buildings, so the landlord can get the maximum money from a small piece of ground. And also for those who have air forces, it's much more economic to bomb flats, to bomb apartment buildings. You can get hundreds of people with one bomb rather than being spread out, you know, it's much more cost effective. So we have these apartment buildings. Sometimes we don't know who our neighbours are. Alhamdulillah, now where I'm living here in Ajman, I've been here for 10 years, I do know my neighbours, especially those good Muslims who I see in the mosque. I know them. But I know when I lived in Dubai, I had neighbours, I didn't know their names, I didn't know their religion, I didn't know their country of origin, nothing. And we would not even greet each other. And the same is done now in many countries in Europe, many countries in Europe. When I was living in Sweden in the 70s, the people downstairs, they called the police. They said, there's a bad smell coming from the flat next door, and it's getting worse. So the police asked them, who lives there? They said, we think there's this old lady who lives there, we're not sure, you know. And sure enough, when the locksmith opened, and they fell backwards with the stench, they found this old lady living alone, died alone, and nobody in the world to care for her. And such is the state now in many places in Europe. So much so that now on the TV in many countries in the winter they say, if you have an elderly neighbour, look out for him or her. If you haven't seen him for a day or something, go and knock on the door. But of course sometimes this isn't useful either, because the old person thinks that they've come to rob him or her. So they won't open the door to anybody, you know. And so people live alone and they die alone, and the population of the Western world is declining. Don't believe all this lies, all these nonsense fabrications about overpopulation. They're just talking about Muslims. They're talking about Muslims. They don't want us to have lots of children. And of course, many Muslims these days, they've fallen in harmony with that. They don't want to have lots of children. Formerly, a man would have 4 wives and 40 children. Now he has 1 wife and 2 children. And the population has gone down and down. And in Europe, it's even worse. Again, Sweden, one of the most developed countries in Western Europe. They're very rich from iron and paper pulp, with a fairly small population, and they have a social security system, so they don't need their neighbours to look out for them. The government gives them money for not working. The government gives them money for everything they need. But their population has plummeted. Often, they don't get married at all. And it's one of the countries where they have written on the form, you know, single, married, salmon, living together. Living together. They recognize that as a form of common law marriage. And they have one child. They themselves are also single children. The mother and the father of this child are also single children. So by the time that single child is 30, the mother and father are usually dead or in an old folks' home. He has no brothers, no sisters, no cousins, no uncles, no aunties, nothing. Just him, all alone in the world like an alley cat. So naturally, such people will not be friendly towards neighbours. They will not think about neighbours. They will think that the neighbour, he has to look out for himself. We have government departments, ministries who take care of problems in the society, and it's not my trouble at all. If he's hungry, if he's thirsty, if he's sick, it's really not any business of mine. With us, we have to be different. We have to follow the example of the early Muslims, how they cared for their neighbours and looked out for them. One hadith where a companion said the Prophet ﷺ received as a gift the head of a goat. You know, we don't think much of it, but you can make a soup from goat's head. You know, it can be, if you're hungry, it's very nice. Because if you're living next to Pizza Hut, perhaps it's not so appealing that you go and boil this goat's head. But if you're a hungry man, you can make a nice soup from it. So the Prophet ﷺ gave it to one of the companions, who gave it to a neighbour, because he thought the neighbour was worse off than him. And that neighbour found somebody worse off than him, and they gave it, so it came round again. It went around. Not that they didn't want it, but just that they thought, this person is poorer than me. He can use this better than me. He has more children or whatever. So this is the system. That we try and live as a society, a brotherhood, and we look out for each other. And we try to know who our neighbours are. Who's my neighbour? If I see him going to the mosque, say salam, shake his hand, make some inquiries, invite him, fadal, like this, you know. Recently, on the Peace TV, there was a man, Frenchman, who came to Islam because when he was travelling in Morocco, he found some people in a village who invited him into the house and fed him, and he thought, you know, this would never happen in my country. I had exactly the same experience also in Morocco, but it could have been in any Muslim country, also in Pakistan. That Muslims said, come, Fadal, come and eat with us. They don't do that in England, they don't do that. And as far as I know, yeah, definitely in Sweden and Germany and other places, if you call on a man, he will say, well look, you know, can you come back in half an hour, we're just eating. You know, you go away and come back because we're eating, we're busy, you know. He'll never invite you in, almost never. So this kind of selfishness, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He doesn't like it in His creatures. He wants us to be charitable. He wants us to be kind to each other. He wants us those who have, to help the ones who haven't. This is a duty upon us. And as I said before, there are two angels Allah has created that from their creation till the day of judgment, they're always making dua, the same dua, over and over and over. One praise: Oh Allah, recompense the generous person. That if a person is generous, recompense him, give him more. And the other angel prays: Oh Allah, destroy the tight-fisted one, or bring about his ruin. Can mean, not necessarily destroy him, but to bring about his ruin. So this is our situation, that we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves those who are generous to their neighbours. And who are our neighbours? There's different opinions from the different scholars. Imam Malik said 20 houses in each direction is your neighbour. Of course, he was living in Medina. And other Imams, they had different views, some less than that. But the point is that we look out for our neighbours, we include them in our list of people we think about. And the Prophet ﷺ said, as I said before, he is not a believer. Now look at that, he's not a believer. That's tremendous, tremendous order from the Prophet ﷺ. He's not a believer who eats his fill and lets his neighbour go hungry. Brothers, please, it's time to move up a bit. Make some room to save our brothers sitting out there in the hot sun. Barakallahu feek. So we should look out for our neighbour. See our neighbour, if he's in trouble, if he has difficulties, if he has a sick family member, if he's out of a job, whatever, we try and offer our assistance. And this is part of being a good Muslim. Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulil Kareem, amma ba'd. All praise to Allah, the Lord of the worlds. We laud Him and call down blessings upon His most noble Prophet. Peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. Before the khutbah started, one brother mentioned on behalf of the ladies of his family that the ladies couldn't hear very well. Is this still the case? If so, please tell your menfolk, and the menfolk will tell me afterwards, and we can try and rig up some new sound system. We Muslims, we have many good points. We do. I know as a non-Muslim, I never ever thought this thing. You hear some non-Muslims say that, in spite of the Muslims, I came to Islam. I always thought that this is a very arrogant stance. As a non-Muslim, I found many nice things about the Muslim people I met. They were generous, they were clean, they protected their women folk, they were pious, they had lots of attractive qualities. And we have also some bad qualities, some qualities that are found in all human beings, of course, not just Muslims, but one of them comes under this heading, or is related to this heading of neighbours. Al-wala al-bara means like accepting and rejecting. Meaning, Like most Arabic phrases or words, we need sentences in English to explain them, because the words are very specific and don't always coincide exactly with English words. We have to explain what they mean. Ibrahim alayhi salam, he tried with his father and his people to guide them. He tried. And the result was that they tried to kill him. So after that, he cut himself off from them. And he refused to have anything to do with them. He even left the area, never to return. Others, like the companion Salman al-Farsi, radiallahu anhu, he left his people and came to live amongst the Arabs, and he made them his people also. He became one of them, you know, he joined in with their language, their culture, everything, married into them, because they were believers. So we as Muslims, we have to be aware of this, not to accept people who are from our culture and language, but are not believers, not to accept them as our close friends, and to reject Muslims who are not from exactly the same culture and language, and prefer the non-Muslims over them, I mean to say. It happens here, you know. I'll just give an example now, please, nothing personal about this. It's just something I've noted. I have many friends who are from Kerala, and I have some friends also who are Pathans. And I find generally they don't like each other. And sometimes a Pathan will be close to a man of his culture and language and tribe who is a bad man, who doesn't pray, things like that. And sometimes a Keralite will be close to a Hindu or a Christian from Kerala, because they have the same language, the same kind of food, you know. And he'll prefer them over the Muslim. But actually this is not right. It is a natural tendency to be with those people we feel comfortable with. But we shouldn't reject those who are Muslims because they're not close to us in language and food and so forth, over non-Muslims. I felt it myself. We had some neighbours in England from Tanzania, and they had a kind of food, they used to invite us for dinner, and frankly I didn't like it, I didn't like the food. Nothing against them, nice Muslims, good brothers, but I didn't like their food, and I would prefer to take something else, I found myself distancing myself from them because of this. Whereas this is not an acceptable reason. If we have neighbours who are from another language group and another kind of cuisine and culture, but are Muslims, we still have to try hard to treat them as neighbours and brothers. We have to. This is wala wal bara, that we accept those people who are believers and bring them close to us, and reject those people who are not believers and who refuse to accept Islam, refuse to accept belief, and we keep them away from us. And this is the nature of the true Muslim. It is part of being neighbourly. So if we find our neighbours are somewhat foreign to us, still if they are Muslims, we have to observe the rights of the neighbour upon them, that we look out for them, we invite them, we give them salams, like that. And even though their language and culture may be a little different, we still have to regard them as our brothers in Islam. We ask Allah to have mercy upon us and forgive us. We ask Allah to bless the Muslims with knowledge and bless the Muslims with the ability to act upon that knowledge and to spread it to others. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ahli Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ahli Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammad wa ala ahli Muhammad kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ahli Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Aqim as-salat.